If you feel all twisted up in the hips and the pelvis, I want you to try these 4 exercises back to back and then leave in the comments how you notice movement feels after doing this. So stand up, walk around, bend forward, do any kind of motion where you normally feel just kind of congested in either one or both hips. Do this series of 4 exercises, and then I want you to come back and do the same movements you did at the start and leave in the comments below what you noticed happened to the way that you're moving and feeling. I invite you to do this series with me. So if you want, I'm going to set the timer. You just follow my cues and let's go through this series together. So starting out lying on your back with both feet flat on the floor, pointed straight ahead. Before we even work on improving function, let's get a pulse on where the position of your pelvis is. So take your hands and kind of palpate around the sides of your waist. I want you to feel the pointy front hip, or I should say pelvic bones here. And then you can kind of trace them all the way around to your back. I want you to have a good idea as to where your pelvis is because we're going to be referencing your pelvis the entire time. Once you know where the pelvis is, then take your fingers and feel around the bottom of your rib cage. What you're looking for is where the bottom of your rib cage is and the spacing between your ribs and your pelvis. Now, ideally, we want this to be equal spacing, but many of you, if you already notice a twisted hip or you just feel bunched up or rotated, you might find that one side of your pelvis is higher up towards your ribs than the other. And the opposite is true for the other side. There's more space between the ribs and the pelvis here. If it's not too much effort and if it's not too complex for you, what I want you to do if you notice an unlevel pelvis is maybe push the higher side a little further away from you. See if we can bring just a little bit more levelness. It doesn't need to be perfect. I want you to make it just maybe a little better than what your natural resting rotated pelvic position is. So once I get a firm understanding of where my pelvis is and I try to make it as level as possible, we're going to keep the pelvis as level as we can throughout the entire series. The first exercise, keeping the pelvis level, lift the right leg, bring the right ankle to the left knee, and using the muscles on the outer right hip, press the right knee away from you. And we're just going to statically hold this press out. We should start to feel the muscles on the right hip working, and by no means did the pelvis twist around. We are trying to get the hip to rotate within a level, neutral pelvis right now. So I've got a minute on the clock. We got 40 seconds left together, just pressing the right knee away from you. Observe what your lower back feels like. Observe what your breath rate is. This is a hip exercise. You might feel other muscles start to stabilize, like your abs or your lower back. I want you to just observe what is working and trying to stabilize when you ask your right hip to rotate, because we're then going to compare how the other side feels in about 10 seconds. Three, two, one. Good. Slowly release that. Let's get out of it the same way we got into it and switch sides. Again, keeping the pelvis level, lift the left leg up, cross it over to the right thigh, and again, using those outer left hip muscles, press that left knee away from you, and I'm going to put 1 minute on the clock. Many of you might already notice there is a massive difference between how the left hip rotates and how the right hip rotates. You might find one side is incredibly easier or more significantly easier to rotate than the other side. You might find that your pelvis stayed in place when you asked one hip to rotate, but really started to twist when you asked the other hip to rotate. If that's the case, leave a comment and let's talk about it below. 30 seconds left. Pelvis stays level. Do a little bit of a pelvic check here and keep pressing. Pay attention to what feels like it's working on this side. Is it the same stabilizing muscles, or are you experiencing the side quite differently? If it's different, this is one great way to understand how imbalance is showing up in your body. Now we're going to switch sides again. So that was the first exercise. The second exercise, lift the right leg up, place it again on the left knee. Using the right hip muscles, press the right knee away from you. But this time, we're going to go one up and lift the left leg off the ground. From the side view, I'm lifting that left leg. Left hip is at 90 degrees. Left knee is at 90 degrees. The shin is parallel to the ground. I'm still pressing that right knee away from me as I'm pulling that left knee towards me. And this should not only improve the rotation of the right hip, but we're also getting to access the strength of the left hip. So think about this in terms of improving rotation, improving mobility and flexibility, as well as also improving strength and stability in this one simple position. That being said, it might not be simple for you. This might actually be quite challenging. We got another 10-second hold. 3, 2, 1. Good. Let's release and switch sides. Now let's cross your left ankle on top of your right knee. Again, press that left knee away from you, and then let's lift the right leg off the ground. So the right hip's at 90 degrees and the right knee is at 90 degrees. Again, press the left knee away, pull the right knee back, and observe what your pelvis is doing. It should have stayed level throughout the entire time. If you feel like you've lost sight of that, then just start over. Find that level pelvis and lift the leg up off the ground. Ten seconds left. Okay, bring the foot down. Perfect. Now both feet are going to be flat on the ground. Let's scoot back so you can see a little bit of a better view. And again, we're checking the position of the pelvis because with the next exercise, again, I don't want it to rise up or twist out of position. Find that level pelvic position. Bring both feet together and let the knees open up and drop down to the side. When your knees open up, you should notice how the pelvis just gently tips forward as their lower back raises just a little bit off of the ground. Don't be surprised if with a level pelvis, you feel one hip work incredibly different than the other hip. As the pelvis is level, we're exposing whatever hip imbalance an unlevel pelvis has hidden when you move. So keeping your pelvis level might actually make things seem more severe because the pelvis isn't being manipulated to hide hip, ankle, or knee imbalances. So just let both knees fall out to the side, open up as the pelvis remains level from the rib cage. Let's be here for another 30 to 40 seconds. And look down at your knees. Let's see if one knee looks like it's a lot higher than the other. See if you can bring some levelness, either by raising one leg up. That's probably going to be the default option because pushing it down isn't an option. It just feels like it's running into something. So maybe bring both knees up until they both feel level, and that way we can be certain both hips are in a level, angular position. And good. Slowly bring the knees, fold them back together. Now, let's come up to all fours. This is the last exercise we're going to do in the series. Tabletop position from the side is going to be the knees right below the hips and the wrist right below the shoulder. Okay, so now this position, we're going to get back into tabletop, and it's all about balance of knee pressure. So I want you to feel equal weight between both knees right now. We're going to lift our right arm straight up towards the ceiling. If you don't have full range of spinal rotation, then don't force this. You don't get a prize by just forcing yourself all the way to the top. Find a level of rotation that feels comfortable. And for some of you, that just might be halfway, and that's okay. Rotate as much as what feels comfortable. And then from here, bring the right arm through and underneath that left arm, Right shoulder comes to the ground and head goes to the ground with you. Now here's the trick. Here's where imbalance will show up. If you have a hip imbalance, you might notice how one side of your pelvis moves over. Maybe you shift over to the left. Maybe you rotate over to the right. If you're paying attention to your knee pressure, you'll have a good understanding of where that pelvis can stay exactly resting in the middle. Take a second or two to breathe there, and then come up out of this, rotate right back up to the ceiling. Right hand goes down to the ground. Now let's switch. Left hand up to the ceiling and rotate through. Again, take a second to feel around where those hips are, trying to find that equal centered hip position. A breath or two here, and then we'll come out of it, reach right up to the ceiling. Let's do this for the next minute and a half together, nice and slow. Choose a pace that works for you. Breath is going to be the key to this one. What I love about this exercise is it really keeps the hips, knees, and ankles, for the most part, in a very still, stationary position, and allows the pelvis and the spine and the shoulders to all rotate. So essentially, we're taking, or at least reducing, any hip imbalance from showing up here, and we're working on improving the rotational aspect of the trunk. You might find one hip starts to really cramp, work harder than the other. It's okay. Okay, so now that you're done with that and you tried it, stand up and walk around. Move around a bit and observe and notice if movement feels any different than it did prior to those 4 really simple beginner corrective exercises. Leave a comment below with what your experience was. I'd love to hear from you.